Every day, we can experience a full range of emotions, from joy to grief, peace, frustration, and everything in between.
But we're still expected to be an A player at work, be a good partner, to parent children, take care of our animals, and have food on the table, even in the throes of grief. So how the hell are we supposed to do it all?
On the Human Sessions podcast, we'll guide you through strategies for being your authentic self in every part of your life, no matter which emotions are in the driver's seat that day. We'll talk about how human design, energy, and Reiki can all be useful tools for showing up and showing up well.
And if we lost you at the word energy, I promise you will walk away from every episode with tactical tips to feel more like yourself.
I'm Rachel Hatterberg-Walt, human energetics expert and Reiki master.
And I'm Val Marini, grief and trauma specialist and energy healer. This is a no bullshit zone.
This is an anti-perfectionism haven.
This is the Human Sessions podcast. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about what our mantra is going into the new year. And I would say this for any new year, so we don't need to be that specific, but focusing on personal revolution instead of resolution. And I know we've got a lot of feelings about this and our own approaches, and it's really aligned in that we met a year ago at a conference that was about goal coaching, but it was clearly very aligned for us because it landed us on this path. But why don't I kick it to you and you can talk a little bit about like your macro level framework, and then I'm happy to share. You know, I used to do this leadership and goal coaching professionally for a number of different organizations and businesses, and I took a few methods towards it, and I've landed in a totally different mindset, which I think we've probably both kind of evolved out of like the old mindset of what this meant,
Yes.
what the significance is, how to lean into quote a new year, new me, and more into the next year evolving me, more mentality.
First, the new year, new me resolution rhetoric really comes from collective conditioning around not being good enough and capitalism to sell us a product that's going to address how we are not good enough, how we are not whole, how we are not worthy. And that to me is the major ick. So that's one major resistance I have to New Year's resolutions, because there's a slew of billion-dollar industries to meet you at your corest wound, your greatest insecurity, to sell you a product or service to, address that. So that's number one. But number two is I've, dove deeper into mindfulness practices, esoteric systems, the human design system in particular. I have realized that we are present moment beings. If we take the esoteric approach, like all we have is the present moment. The past was the present moment at some time, and the future will be a present moment. This is where all of our control lies, all of our clarity lives. When we talk in human design terms around aura types and strategies and authorities, it's generally a present moment decision-making basis. It's generally an opportunity or an invitation or something arises in the present moment that you then respond to or react to and have a response to. With disclaimers around emotional waves, you have to take your temperature around your emotional waves. So that's not necessarily the acute present moment. And for my reflector aura types out there, the 28-day, waiting cycle is there. They're meant to respond and operate in even a greater, slower pace than present moment beings.
Yeah.
But what I always tell my clients, and I think we should get merch on this, is like, the future is none of your business. The future is none of your business. And it's a little bit of a shocking way to say, stay in the present moment. That's where your control lies. That's where your present moment awareness, clarity, confidence lives. And then breeding trust for your future self to make great present moment decisions in the future. So I liken it to pulling an arrow back and having really good trajectory for that arrow, and then releasing that. And then along along the way, whatever the timeline is, if that's a month that you want to intend to do something or create something, whether that's 6 months, a year, 5 years, whatever, shepherding that intention along the way with unblocking yourself from unhelpful patterns that are preventing you from receiving what you intend to receive, expanding your mind to know it's possible for you, keeping yourself in more of a field of possibility rather than prescribing a
Yeah.
exact trajectory, and then being able to receive more instead of force and push and girl boss and hustle. We put these restrictions on things that most of the time, if I look back in my goal setting history, are very arbitrary. It's like, well, what should I do in the next six
That's
months? I
right.
don't even know. I don't know that girl. I am a sacral generator. I know my present moment girl, but tomorrow I'm going to have different energy riding through me and have a different approach to something. That desire might not feel as resonant to me. So I'm not going to want to spend my time, money, schedule on that thing that doesn't resonate with me anymore. I don't know who Rachel is a month from now. I don't know who Rachel is a year from now. If I could have, but when I met you a year ago, I could have never told you the sequence of events that would have unfolded in my life if I
Yeah.
were to do traditional goal setting, resolution setting things. I would have greatly restricted myself. I mean, I've manifested new jobs, new clients, new contracts, a whole new house, a whole renovation of said house. I could not, that was not on my bingo card, a
Yeah.
year ago, 2024. So I think what tends to happen and what I've seen with my clients and with myself is when I set traditional goals, it's really restricting the possibility of what can come in a quicker timeline because of old stories or typical conditioned stories that I'm telling myself. I mean, before we manifested this house, my husband and I thought, maybe we would renovate our old house or buy a house within the next 3 to 5 years. Well, it happened within, 4 months,
Yeah.
5 months. So if I would have taken the traditional approach of my resolution is to save money to buy a house, then it would have taken me 5 years where I said, my intention. I'm going to keep my eyes, heart open, my mind open about how this can come through. It came in 5 months. I could have never predicted that.
So much of what you said is very similar to my own path. And when we used to teach this, or the frameworks that we were given to teach it, especially when we were doing it in more of a corporate setting, I understand from a business perspective that SMART goals kind of align where it's like we need to have something that's measurable, we need to be able to track it, all of those things. Perhaps, yes, with certain roadmaps and certain products and certain business deliverables. And it comes back to one of the comments you made in the beginning where like, why are we on this cycle where we believe that things are going to change over in a year and we need to reset on the first of the year? Well, that's also how the markets work. That's how,
Uh-huh,
I work in a very capitalistic structure. Everything
uh-huh.
resets on 12/31. All of your goals for a business, all of your revenue, all of our taxes are based off of that. There's so many cycles and processes that are around this like January 1 to December 31st mapping. And listen, we can argue whether that's practical or not practical all day long, but at some point we have to like mark a time to like break things down.
Well, we need some structure.
We
I
need
mean,
some
that's just
structure.
kind of basic energetic principles is like creation needs some sort of structure. And some creations call for a lot of structure
Yeah.
at a lot of different levels, and other creations call for a more open type of a structure. It's like water in a river. Like if you don't have the banks of the river, you have a flood. If you have too many stones, you have a dam and you're going to have
Mhm.
overflow and it's going to cause problems. So, how can we find the appropriate aligned structure that these particular goals and intentions need to shepherd the project in the way that the project
Yeah.
needs to be shepherded versus like keeping it small and safe because of our capitalistic
Yeah.
patterns and history.
Removing ourselves from those other rhythms because I think a lot of us
Hmm.
when we talk about it, we're either on that like calendar cycle or I defer a little bit more to the school year cycle somehow. That
Hmm.
some felt like the beginning and the end of something for me. But the more that I've evolved in just personal, I would call it life design, right? So it's not goal setting necessarily, it's life design. What am I open to? And to your point, and as a manifesting generator, I get pulled in and energized by a million things in a year. I
Hmm.
can't set a hard and fast rule about like one specific thing, especially if, and this is where it comes back to frameworks that we were talking about in the last episode. Most of what I put in my goal setting in prior years, especially in my 20s, I would say when I got really into this because I was feeling ungrounded. And what I really
Hmm.
needed were frameworks and resources to figure out how to ground myself, not a blueprint on how to exhaust myself more and set more expectation and get into this like achievement culture that we
Well, and I
created.
think that's what it is. It's like a need trying to get met over control, over clarity, over empowerment. And it's coming from lack, it's coming from perfectionism, it's coming from feelings of unworthiness. And it's that attempt to get clarity around, okay, well, if I make a SMART goal,
Yep.
I have a blueprint that I've created, whether it's constricting or not. At least I have clarity, which feels better than lack of control most of the
Yeah.
time, right? Um, so it's how can we dance with life instead of control because we're trying to get a need met. That's
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
like
hard to do.
opening up bigger doors and allowing for something to land. And I think
Hmm.
one of the other interesting areas is typically in goal setting, we break it up into like career, family, life, what have you. Don't focus ourselves on what we truly need versus what we feel like we want or feel like we should have.
Hmm.
And I think, especially when we did it in large groups back in the early 2000s, it was a lot of comparison. It was a lot of the
Mm.
same rooting that was just problematic in how we were showing up with ourselves and with others every day. And now when I do it, it's more when I look at the next year, it's like, okay, how am I going to take advantage of this wintering season? Because I absolutely winter. I do not like to go
I
out.
do
I
too.
do not like to connect. I mean, I like to connect, but I don't like to create obligations or expectations for myself. It's very much like I know I have to recharge. My natural rhythms and the rhythms in my life are going to pick up as things get warmer. So, how am I grounding and setting myself up for success? What do I want to learn? What is going to help resource me through that time? What are the boundaries that I need to develop? What routine changes can I gradually lean into and test? I think,
Well, I think that is huge. Like knowing the macro of like what are my intentions, like from a bigger scale, a 30,000 foot view of what I want to create at that higher level. And then how does that translate into my everyday time, love, money priorities to enable that to happen? And I think what we're talking about really is integrity. Being in integrity with your values is a huge trajectory for that arrow
yeah,
to maintain the path that you want it to maintain and to create what you want to create. If you're setting arbitrary goals based on influence from an ego perspective
mhm,
or a need trying to get met in well, it doesn't even have to be an unresourceful way, but in an authentic way, perhaps. Making goals from that place is going to bring up a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of burnout, a lot of misaligned priorities on
yeah.
time, love, and money. And then, could potentially tank your self worth if you don't meet those arbitrary goals that are trying to get a need met. Versus the practice I've adopted now is what are my core values? And I use a tool called To Be Magnetic
Mhm.
that is so helpful to do this, especially at the turn of the year when we are kind of wintering, we're preparing for spring, we're getting the foundations laid for the fruits that want to bud in the spring. Um, what are my core values? For me, that's freedom, impact, grounding, and creation. Those are four core
Mhm.
values that I want every dollar I spend, every minute I spend doing something, every morsel of
Yep.
energy, neuron firing, love exchange to be in the realm of those four core things. So if one of my higher goals is, let's say, a creative practice, that's all I say is a creative practice. I want to use my
Yeah.
creativity every single day. And then I look at my schedule every day. How am I enabling a creative practice to be present in my schedule? If I'm not, prioritizing that in my schedule, if I'm not time blocking that, if I'm not putting that on my work schedule or our home shared schedule, or if I don't have tools to play with my creativity, um, that goal is not going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm not creating space and structure in my everyday life to enable that intention to come into fruition. It's kind of like
Yeah.
we have to hold the macro, yes, but we also have to get granular and look at our bank accounts, look at our schedules, look at our time and love, and see if they are aligned together and in integrity together.
Yeah. Well, it comes down to, and what I'm hearing you say, which is exactly where I think we were going with this, is it's not about the externalities. We often are like, oh,
Mhm.
we're going to grab from all these things. Oh, I'm going to get this. I'm going to achieve this. I'm going to do this. People will view me this way. I will get this recognition or validation. And when we're talking about personal revolution and really changing our lives and becoming aligned with the lives that we want that fit us based off of who we are and not what we've seen or what society would tell us is like good or correct or the goal, we have to find that alignment with ourselves or nothing. This isn't an outside exercise. It
Mhm.
has to resonate with us. It has to be true in our bones. That's how it's going to be sustainable. That's how we're going to find that alignment where we are in that self abundance that attracts all of the things and people that we want and need. And yes, it's about how we grow and develop ourselves. And from that, then we will, I think, achieve the things that are truly meant for us that we, to your point, would not be able to write down today for a month from now, a year from now, 10 years from now. And when I was back in the goal coaching industry in a more specific way, it was 10-year, 5-year, 3-year. And I think directionally and what you pointed out, like the North Star, that makes sense.
Yeah.
When you have a North Star, you have this sort of concept when you start to know yourself, like I have a vision for where I want to be in 10 years, but it's not, I had folks that would be like, well, 10 years from now, I'm going to be married and I'm going to have 2 girls and a boy and a golden retriever, and I'm going to live at this address. And you're like, okay, maybe. Maybe
Mhm.
that does happen. Maybe you are seeing kind of into your future, but what are we doing today to prepare for that? And what are we doing
Mhm.
today to make sure that we are our best selves in that moment? Like for me, I came from a family where I know there was a lot of just generational trauma and generational challenges. And so I knew that the right answer for me was not to be like, well, I'm going to have kids by the time I'm 35 because that's the expectation. It was like, no, by the time I'm 35, I'm going to start resourcing myself to make sure that whatever choice I make or whatever um, life brings to me, I'm best prepared to handle it, whether it's a dog, whether it's a child, a relationship with others, relationship with myself. And I think the desire, and it's so rational when we are in suffering, the desire is to be like, no, I just need to find that external thing that's going to save me. I need to
Oh,
find this
yeah.
relationship. So I'm going to focus on dating. I'm just going to double down on like going on as many dates as possible. And it's like, okay, but are you the same person that was wounded by previous relationships or has wounding that was coming up in your relationships? Or are you the same person going into multiple more to learn the same lesson and you think that more reps are going to fix it? Or are you learning to like pull back and say, hey, I want that relationship. I want that best companionship for myself. So I'm going to learn how to be my best companion and then allow that to attract. And that is
Oh, that's
so
it.
hard.
That's so hard. It's so hard because it's like you're speaking to what influence are we under and our deepest why. And like weight loss industry, they're
Yeah.
like you have to know why you're losing weight or it won't be sustainable. Well, of course. Why do you want if you have a resolution to lose 10 pounds in 2025, like why? Is it because you think that's going to make you happier? You think you're going to fit in your clothes better? You think you're going to get more significance or more attention, or your partner's going to notice you more? Or like get real with yourself. I
Why
have this
and
workshop.
how, right?
And how? Well, and I think the why is so much more important than the how, even because it's like you can see how, but if your why is misaligned
Mhm.
to that goal, like it's irrelevant. Like if you want to lose weight because you're trying to chase an idyllic body appearance according to, you know, culture, that is not going to sustain you
Yeah.
for the long haul of actually living a healthy lifestyle physically, right? I have this workshop called Find Your Why Workshop, where it helps you get to the chorus of whys. So it has this spiral. And so you put your intention at the top of the
Mhm.
page, and then you ask yourself, okay, let's say I want to earn 10,000 more dollars this year, or whatever it is. Why?
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's because I want to pay my bills. Okay. Why do you care about that? Well, because it's my safety. Why? Okay. It's because, you ask yourself these layers of why, and it helps you get at the actual core of your motivation for setting that goal or that intention. And then that brings you so much clarity on, wow, is this even a goal that I want
Yeah.
to make? Or is this $10,000 like an arbitrary number that I just feel like I've heard somebody say before? Like it helps
Mm.
bring more clarity and foundation to your intention.
Well, and it's like whether it's a goal and we're talking goal coaching or just an expectation, right? I mean, I was talking
Hmm.
to my team at work and just shared with them that 3 or 4 weeks ago, I mean, we have a lot going on. But 3 or 4 weeks ago, I have a lot going on at work. I have a lot going on in my own life and transition. We have a lot going on here with this podcast and what we're trying to build with our businesses. And I had this moment where I hit overwhelm. I
Hmm.
laid on the ground in my office and did my little self-healing posture and had to sit there and walk myself through what is the thing that is stressing me out? And is this a real stressor and a real deadline, or is this a self created expectation that is actually super flexible and I can re rank what is a true priority versus what is something that's just taking up space in my mind and write down the entire list of things and be like, okay, I have them written here. I'm not going to forget about them. I can let that go. What is a true priority for right now? And like kind of rebalance, like, why
Hmm.
am I stressing myself out? And to your point, is $10,000 for savings like a great aspirational goal to be like, hey, I would love to do that. But that doesn't mean I'm going to sacrifice things that I need to remain joyful in that process. Um,
Right. Well, because there's a reason why we're setting those goals. And usually it's because you'll be happier. You think you'll
yeah,
be happier. You think you'll be more satisfied. You think you'll feel more secure. Whatever those core needs that are trying to actually be met through that goal are. And then when you reach that goal and you realize, oh, I have 10,000 more dollars maybe in my savings, but I don't feel
yeah,
any happier. It's removing that block. It's like if we can get clear at the front of what works for us, what would really flow our energy from our core values in a way that feels good and true to our core self, then when we do meet that intention or meet that goal, it will feel like the next natural step. It won't feel like this hurdle or this attainment of like, now I'm worthy, now I'm happy, now I'm secure, right? It will feel like the next natural step because it's this fluid, living, breathing balance of life instead of new year, new me. I'm going to be better if I have $10,000 in the bank account. And then you get there and you're like, shit, I've got more bills. So now that $10,000 is like flying out the door
yeah.
faster than when I didn't even have it. Um,
Well,
so it's an interesting,
we forget that
interesting
balance,
way.
right? Like this comes up all the time in talking about trauma healing and trauma work. The point of trauma healing and the point of recovering from trauma isn't to be better at handling trauma. It's to
Mhm.
learn how to allow joy in. It's to learn how to allow in happiness. because usually that's what has been stripped of us from us. So if part of our, the impact of trauma and our conditioning or whatever it is puts us in a place of scarcity and lack, we're going to want to go to the polar opposite end and create abundance through scarcity and lack if we haven't healed the parts of ourselves that are like, okay, like there's got to be a middle road here because I need to also enjoy my life. How I get to this destination should not feel punitive. It should not feel like suffering.
Right.
It's like both understanding how to create that space for joy and on the human design side, understanding where we derive energy from and how do we meet those things in the middle so that the path that like the enjoyable path, right? So I may in 10 years from now want to have $10 million. I don't, but like there we are. There's a number. I don't know that I'm going to be here 10 years from now. So am I going to suffer my way
Hmm.
to this arbitrary goal? Or am I going to find a balance where it's like, okay, if I live 10 more years from now, I want to make sure that I am making responsible financial decisions and moment to moment. I can do that in a very practical way. I'm not going to do these things that are like what I do when I'm going to throw my hands up and I'm just going to like buy all the food at Whole Foods and give up on everything else and not make maybe my smarter choices. But I should still be like excited about what I'm doing and have investment in the process.
Yeah. I mean, but that also is influenced by collective messaging around working hard, suffering for it to be worth it when you get the work done. I mean, that's a very Western kind of American value is like suffer and then you have the ability to enjoy whatever you get from that
Yeah.
suffering. And if it's easy and comes to you in more of a fluid way, like is it even worth it? I'm like, did you even create it if you didn't suffer your way through it?
Yeah.
So I think there's a level of deconditioning from collective messaging around that. Um, we have a lot of conditioning and messaging around suffering and working and hustling to get something done versus allowing, receiving, getting clarity, prioritizing things, and then making our daily habits, daily energy outputs in alignment with that to
Yeah.
bring it in. Talking about the trauma and the trigger that we need to heal to be able to allow happiness in. It's like I think it's Brene Brown that talks about joy is the scariest emotion because with joy comes the lack of joy and the loss of that. And I think the more we're able to heal our nervous system and allow joy to sit in our nervous system and
Yeah.
expand those edges that have been so constricted through life experience and trauma and loss, um, the more we will be able to trust in life and loosen up some of the reins we have around our goals and how we make our intentions and then how we shepherd that going forward. I know that was a huge part of my journey is I remember like the spiritual bypass kind of spiritual rhetoric around like high vibes only and
Yeah.
good vibes only and only think good thoughts or you're going to manifest all this terrible thing and I thought god how do I do that all I do is worry and my spirals of negativity just bring me down and I can't see a positive path forward and when I experience joy it's almost like you feel like it's going to jinx like you're going to jinx it and then you're going to lose it if you actually allow yourself to feel happiness and joy. And there's a real awakening in allowing your nervous system to heal and allowing yourself to feel joy and to indulge in your senses and to revel in that feels so scary when you're
Yeah.
first starting out that might be part of why we restrict our goal setting is because when we get it, we're kind of scared to get it because then we're scared to lose it. And the nervous system expansion of that is a
Well, and
process, it's
also
a journey.
like, when I was 25 is when I was really in the thick of this because I was, working doing like grassroots Lululemon expansion and my focus was community. And this was before it was like the company that it is now. And it was a little bit more yogic. And I was young and I struggled. I struggled then to actually like hit the categories in the way that I think it was supposed to. And I was like, I don't know about like the SMART goals. Like I had a little bit more of like this ethereal direction. Like I felt pulls in different directions, but they were not defined necessarily. And it's funny because a lot of them I hit. I hit a lot of these things that I thought were unattainable. And to your point, like with your home, I wanted to own small businesses. Well, that like manifested pretty quickly. And I had all of these experiences. I knocked everything out and got to the end and was like, oh, that was my 10-year vision. I've knocked every one of these things out in 5 years.
Mhm.
I had an imbalance in terms of like career and the more like, work culture aspect and less on the personal side. And so what happened was I pushed forward and I just created a deeper imbalance in myself
Mm.
with layered on this like, well, what do I do now? Because my natural step would be to keep driving in these directions, but there's nothing that I'm not attached to anything. There's no destination. Like if you ask me now where I want to be in 10 years from a career standpoint, and we do that sometimes. That's like an
Mhm.
interview question. Like, where do you want to be in 5 years? It's like, I don't know, but I can tell you
The future is none of my
how I
business,
want
but
to
here are my
feel.
intentions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's where I want to have improved my cycles. This is how I want to
Right.
ground better. These
Here
are
are my
some of the
values.
things that I would like
Yeah.
to learn more because I don't feel completely balanced in my education or my background or whatever it is. And those are not like, I don't mean like capital E education. It's more exposure to things that I haven't experienced in my life so I can understand perspectives differently. Areas where I feel like early on I like hit fast forward. Or still hit fast forward where like this morning I didn't have the same time. We had a lot going on, a lot of transition and like schedules and things in the house. And I did not do my morning routine. And it could be very easy for me to like start to skip that a little bit more every single day. And so it's like things like that. We're like, no, where do I want to get like a little bit more intentional? Those are goals for me. Of like,
Mhm.
hey, I want to be more conscious in these areas. I want to
Mhm.
read these 5 books that, by the way, I ordered 5 years ago because I was like in a binging of what I thought like who I was going to be and would read a book a day, I guess is where I landed in my mind. And
Mhm.
then I supplied myself with that opportunity and just never hit it. So it's stuff like that where it's like trying to figure out what works, what's directionally going to help. And the hard part in that is that I think most of us can get there if that's the assignment. But then when we're left to our own devices of how do we navigate this day to day, we just go off the track and get into this place where it's like, well, what is that person doing? Or I'm going to do this thing, but I'm going to go down this rabbit hole. And then I'm not even just going to spiritually bypass, I'm going to intellectually bypass the hard parts and not sit in them thinking that reaching for my goals is going to be, I'm going to take away that suffering with the toxic positivity, with the no, like I'm going to achieve this thing and I'm going to only focus on that. And I'm going to negate all of the other resourcing and all the other foundational components that I need in my ecosystem to allow me when I meet that moment to show up and achieve it. And I mean, have it, experience it, embody it, not achieve it to check it off like a compliance exercise.
And two, our energetic needs for structure around our intentions and goals are different according to human design too. And you probably know that to be true. Like, I am not a or a type that is structure based. My arrows. So in human design, you have these arrows. You have 4 arrows that inform some of the other details of the chart that we probably won't go into a lot here. But from a higher perspective, they go towards the left or towards the right. If you have a lot of arrows going towards the left, you need more structure. Like your energetic system performs better with more structure. Val, I believe you have 3 arrows going to the left. So you thrive. Yeah. You thrive with more structure around whatever
Mhm.
your intentions
Yeah.
are. And so you want to enable yourself that way. But I am 2 and 2. So I need some structure, but I need just as much freedom to have the creative, intuitive, present moment adjusting that I need to feel good. When I put too much structure on a goal, it stifles
Yeah.
me and it rebels me and I quit. I quit.
Yeah.
Um, there's no one answer for everyone. Like structure for some people enables them.
Yeah.
Structure for other people, depending on how much or how little, like really stifles them. So it just depends
Oh,
on your
and
energetic
I also
signature, but
appreciate that
human design can help that.
you knew that about yourself, because I remember when we first met, you were like, "Hey, this is how we need to operate. If we go in this direction, I'm gonna run screaming into the hills." And I was like, "That's actually
Yeah.
awesome because I don't have to navigate this, and I also don't have to take it personally. I'm gonna lean into these areas, which is where I thrive and get energy, and I'm not gonna ask you to participate in them so that you have the energy to finish the things that I don't." And so far, that's
Yeah.
worked well. So I think
Yeah.
to really like kind of land this home and cap this off for everybody, we are intending to go into 2025 with a little bit more of personal revolution focus, and we'll provide some resourcing and also in person and virtual options once we get into January of workshops that put some of these things into practice, help us walk through and navigate based off of aura type or just the many other factors that come through in our human design, which Rachel can certainly filter, and then take it into the context of how do we start to channel and redirect ourselves into taking advantage of these natural seasons and cycles that we absolutely should to reevaluate, reset, but understanding that it's not always sprinting. Sometimes it's a
Mhm.
hard march through really difficult things, and that's super worth it. But learning how to be more intuitive, how to embody some of these practices will be a focus that we come back to in the new year, as well as a little bit of a story of how we met and how that kind of manifested in the journey that we went on to build something last year, and how we're going to look at and think about expanding upon that in this new year.
Thank you so much for listening to Human Sessions. If you loved this episode, please make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts so more people can join our Human Sessions. We'll see you in the next episode.